In part 1, we covered the rise of the Achaemenid Empire under Cyrus the Great. In this, part 2, we look at Cyrus's son, Cambyses II. Although his rule was much shorter than his father's, he did much to add to the empire the Persians now referred to simply as Kshasa, which meant this empire. This empire, in 530 BCE under Cyrus, stretches in the east to the far borders of what is now modern-day Afghanistan and Pakistan, and in the west to the far borders of present-day Turkey. The echoes of the Achaemenid Empire would continue to ring long after its decline and fall, but for now, we will continue to focus on its rise. During Cyrus's conquering of Babylon, his son Cambyses led religious ceremonies for the empire. When Cyrus died, Cambyses became the King of Kings. Unlike his father's reign of decades, Cambyses' reign would not even see 1 decade, for he would die 7 years into his rule under mysterious circumstances. However, in these 7 years, he would continue his father's vision of expansion. The one independent state that remained east of where his father had conquered was Egypt. The pharaoh of Egypt, Ahmose II, whose name meant "the moon is born," was made pharaoh by his own sword arm, killing his predecessor, the pharaoh Apries. Cambyses had requested aid of Ahmose, aid from a physician specializing in eye care that would come to visit him in his capital. Ahmose complied with this request, but forced the physician by the name of Ujahorsenet to keep his family in Egypt, essentially to maintain a leash on him. The reasons for this is that in addition to being a physician and a priest of Neith, he also controlled a portion of the Egyptian navy as an admiral. Angered at having his family used as pawns, he instead approached Cambyses with an idea: to marry the daughter of the pharaoh and strengthen Persian ties with Egypt, and of course, some personal leverage of his own. Cambyses complied, but Pharaoh Ahmose tricked Cambyses. Rather than send his own daughter, he sent the daughter of the previous pharaoh he had usurped. She was named Nitetis, and she informed Cambyses upon arrival of the deceit. Cambyses was understandably furious, and he wanted to punish Ahmose. Just prior to Ahmose sending Nitetis to Persia, he had fallen out with a Greek councilman, tactician, and mercenary by the name of Phanes of Halicarnassus. Phanes had served the Egyptian court and was well respected by them and the military elite. However, for reasons not truly ever uncovered, the two ended up in disagreement, with Phanes being disgruntled and ultimately wanting to seek out an audience with the Persian emperor. Ahmose, at hearing this, became extremely anxious, and he sent one of his most trusted eunuch guards after Phanes. Phanes, for his part, likely aware of the eunuch guard tailing him, headed instead to Lycia, where unfortunately he was captured. However, ever the tactician, he was able to get the eunuch guards extremely drunk, and when passed out, he made his escape towards the Persian capital. Phanes's timing would be extremely serendipitous, as Cambyses, having already been angered and planning invasion, drilled Phanes of the information required for the invasion to be a success. Phanes counseled him about the need to request aid of the main Arabian king in the lands between the Persian Empire and Egypt for safe passage through those lands. Cambyses complied and sent a request to the Arabian king. The king himself, also an enemy of the pharaoh, not only complied, but assisted with troops and water for the desert march, first to Gaza and then beyond to Pelusium, the initial target of the invasion. This would be crucial towards the ultimate success for the Persians, as the Egyptian military relied in great part on Phanes's counsel. Ahmose would die 6 months before Cambyses' arrival at Pelusium, leaving his son Psamtik III to push back the Persians. However, Cambyses was also able to gain assistance from the Cypriot towns and from a tyrant, Polycrates of Samos. Polycrates had agreed to back the Egyptian pharaohs, but was swayed via a massive bribe payment to back the Persians instead. Cambyses and his troops left the capital and entered the Arabian lands, and true to his word, the Arabian king provided them food and drink along the length of the route via various way stations. The first target and only direct resistance encountered would be at Gaza. The Persians put Gaza to siege, a siege that will continue even after the upcoming battle. The larger balance of the Persian forces continued on towards Pelusium and Memphis beyond. Psamtik became incensed at hearing the Persian advance and of Phanes' betrayal, so incensed that he rounded up Phanes' male children, stood them between two bowls, and had them cut one by one, draining their blood and mixing it with wine, which he and his councilmen drank before the battle. Polycrates and the Cypriots would ensure that the Egyptians would not be able to make use of the Mediterranean and force them to bunker on the land instead. Psamtik had stationed his troops along the fork of the Red Sea where it neared the Nile. If the inhabitants of Pelusium had hoped to surrender, that hope was dashed, as Psamtik had his troops fall back into the city as the Persians neared. According to the Greek historian Ctesias, the Persians fought ferociously and were said to employ sacred Egyptian animals like cats in the battle to instill maximum fear into the Egyptians. The Persian immortals, usually reserved in battle, fought at the front ranks and cut down thousands of Egyptians. The victory was said to be so lopsided, the Egyptians lost 7 men for every Persian downed. When it became clear that the Persians had the upper hand, panic struck the Egyptians, who would flee in droves, falling back to the city of Memphis. According to another Greek historian, Herodotus, Cambyses was reluctant to shed more blood despite his victory at Pelusium, and he offered the Egyptians in Memphis an end to the struggle. He sent a Persian herald in a ship to relay this offer. It was said the Egyptians, upon seeing the Persian vessel, rushed out and attacked the ship, killing all on board and taking their torn limbs with them back into Memphis. Cambyses was soon upon the city, and he subjected it to his siege tactics. The Egyptian losses in Memphis were even greater, at 10 for every Persian loss, and it is said a further 2,000 Egyptians died. Soon, the city fell, even while Gaza was still under siege. The pharaoh attempted to flee the city, but he was quickly captured, and he was allowed to live under Persian watch, but would end up committing suicide after attempting a revolt against his new overlords, a revolt that would be crushed in its entirety. The Achaemenid Empire now annexed Egypt into its possession, with Cambyses as its new pharaoh, putting an end to the 26th dynasty. The Libyan kingdom beyond sued for peace, which the Persians granted. The remaining 3 years of Cambyses' life are filled with historical uncertainty. There are hints of a failed invasion into the Kushite kingdom south of Egypt, but no factual certainty that this occurred. There are carved reliefs that show a Kushite delegation offering tributes of ivory, incense, and an okapi for the zoo of the King of Kings. Similarly, there are hints of a planned conquest of Carthage in the west, said to have not taken place due to the unwillingness of the Phoenicians to fight their own kin. Where the truth lies in these is difficult to discern. However, what we do know is that Cambyses died either from an accidental or self-inflicted thigh wound in 522. There's some debate as to how long or if there was a Persian prince by the name of Bardiya who sat on the Achaemenid throne while Cambyses campaigned in Egypt. However, we know with certainty that in the same year of his death, he would be succeeded by Darius. That brings us to the end of part 2 of the Persia Rises series. In part 3, we'll take a look at Darius, who along with Cyrus was one of only a handful of King of Kings to bear that title. If you like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up and or leaving a comment telling me what you liked or disliked. Also, if you've watched a few videos and you've enjoyed this, please consider hitting the subscribe button, and if you do, welcome aboard. Till the next video, cheers.